Good evening. It is Tuesday, May 2nd, 2023 to 6:30 p.m. This is the time and date for the committee meeting for the month of May for the Northern Lebanon School District Board of Directors. I call this meeting to order. First item on the agenda for this evening are our presentations. Dr. Messinger.
Yeah, we actually have two tonight. The first thing I wanted to do is anybody that could make it, that I know they get recognized elsewhere. We wanted to make sure that they get recognized in front of the board, and they couldn't make it tonight. And there were obviously several that couldn't make it tonight. We'll make sure they get their certificate. But we do have one very special young lady, Elena Lauber, who is here. We're going to ask Director Nam, our board president, and Mr. Reese if they would present you with your certificate. And Mrs. Bruce is going to get a little picture. And congratulations to you on being Middle School Student of the Month. I know that's quite an accomplishment. I heard rumors that your parents will be giving you $1,000. I hesitate to only have you here for 2 minutes. You are welcome to stay. And when you get bored, just hit your parents and they will take you home or wherever you want to go. Frostbites is open. Our second presentation is by Dr. Kuiper. Dr. Kuiper unfortunately got home and his water heater blew and is stuck at home right now working on that. I'm filling in for him. He wanted to talk a little bit about the spring sports. He's been presenting GPAs and participation. So he has a slide. I'm going to try to read it from here. Oh boy. Yeah.
I can read it.
All right. I can read the top 152 total participants, which is 22% of the high school for just the spring. That's just the spring. Can you read the numbers that participated across the sports for us?
Absolutely. So baseball had 30 participants, softball 19, boys tennis 9, and then track and field had 39 boys and 40 girls, while boys volleyball had 15.
And then, and just a quick go through that, I know that baseball is 11-5. They are currently in district playoffs if it were to end today, and they're currently second in their section, having a really good year and have some very winnable games in their last 4. So hoping that they finish out strong. Softball, I believe, was supposed to play today and got, I think the field was too soft down at Peckway. But I believe their next win clinches a section title for them. I know that some of our tennis players advanced on into playoffs. I don't know that I know everybody that was successful. I know Colin Wall at least had won a match in the playoffs. Track and field has counties starting Thursday, I believe. And they'll be participating in that. And I know that boys volleyball is actually just one spot in their first year with a full schedule. They're one spot out of districts as well and has had some success, and senior night is tomorrow night for them. So having a fairly good spring season for NL. And believe it or not, I might correct me if I'm wrong, but he also has the GPAs listed there. 3.29 for baseball, 3.38 for softball, 3.86 for tennis, track and field 3.22, and boys volleyball 3.22. That's pretty good eyesight, isn't it? Yeah,
2020.
I know that, again, another example of our kids that participate in things and their academic success, that all of those teams have over a 3.0. And I think for the year, all of the teams have had over a 3.0. So really glad about that. And again, Dr. Kuiper had hoped to be here tonight, but had other things happen at home. So I think there's no more, is there, Kirk? Okay, that's the end of that report.
Thank you, Dr. Messinger. I failed to mention at the beginning of the committee meeting that the board did meet in executive session this evening immediately before the committee meeting to discuss the proposed terms of the CBA. So I apologize for missing that at the outset. And I should also mention that this is a committee meeting. We are serving as a committee of the whole. That is the way that this district has chosen to operate our committee meetings for the recent past. We'll move now to the public comment portion of tonight's meeting. I understand that we do have 2 items for public comment this evening. I will read, and I just read this from our policy just so that the public is aware of the public comment policy. All individuals wishing to participate in the board meeting were asked to register their intent with the secretary by 3 p.m. The day of the meeting, that's today. They were asked to specifically state their names and the topic to be addressed and group affiliation, if applicable, this evening when they go to speak. Participants must be recognized by the presiding officer and must preface their comments by an announcement of their name and group affiliation, if applicable. Each statement made by a participant shall be limited to 4 minutes duration. No participant may speak more than once on the same topic unless all others who wish to speak on that topic have been heard. All statements shall be directed to the presiding officer. No participant may address or question school directors individually. This afternoon, I did receive a request from one of the public commenters asking for an additional 2 minutes to speak. Per policy 903, I'm permitted to waive the 4-minute requirement if the rest of the board agrees to do so. If we do agree to do so, then that will apply to both public commenters. Is there any objection to waiving the 4-minute requirement?
No objection.
Okay, hearing no objection, then we will waive the 4-minute requirement and we'll set that at 6 minutes for this evening. So we do have 2 public commenters. The first is Ariane Day. And I will start your time as soon as you state your name.
Hey, my name is Ariane Day at 47 Sweetbriar Lane. Really quickly, I just wanted to ensure certain aspects of the proposed agreement of sales for the schools have been addressed, and you all have an opportunity to discuss them when you actually go to meet. First, let me preface with I'm not trying to undermine anybody that's been involved in this process whatsoever. I just have some questions that I hope that all of you as directors have been asking before you formally approve any of these, I guess, proposed sales. So when it comes to the Lickdale lot specifically, it does concern me that the board is advised in using an appraisal value and possibly a CMA that is 6 months old for the final sale price of that specific property. The appraisal was dated for October of last year. I'm not entirely sure on the date of the CMA. There was no date on it. So unless like you're actually immersed within the local commercial market on a day-to-day basis, you're not necessarily going to know what the buzz and the demand for such properties actually are in this area, especially if you're only looking at numbered data. This includes appraisers and agents who are doing work for the board that aren't living here locally. So using 6-month-old data is a bit concerning to me, specifically because the Northern Lebanon School District is specifically unique and has many prime mixed properties, commercial, residential, and things like that that are coveted by many potential buyers that don't necessarily come up for sale very often. Again, with its proximity to 81 and 78 and things like that, there's certain characteristics that you can't just shove into a formula per se to pull out a value. These schools are our greatest assets that we have as a district. And I understand that you're trying to make the best decisions with the information that is provided to you. But it does concern me even more that the district would move ahead and agree to a proposal without first opening up these properties on the MLS to see what the public interest is. The decision to sell to the Gap is certainly an emotional one. And I, as a military wife myself, understand the appeal and the positive impacts that it can have on soldiers and their families. Their verbal plan sounds great, but I do believe that it was jumped upon a little too quickly, and maybe some steps that we should have taken weren't taken before either accepting agreement or sale or considering it. And I would strongly urge the board to have their real estate representative, who is hopefully a local realtor, list the property on the MLS for a period of time prior to signing off on this sale. At least open it up to another possibly tax-paying entity that will be able to pay back into the district as well. If no agreement has been finalized, or if the board, you still have an ability to counter or discuss things, I would strongly encourage you to consider asking your representative about countering this agreement with something like a kickout clause. So should another buyer come forward within a specific time frame, you have the ability to review that offer, and the GAP still has the ability to match that offer if it's one that you would consider. Right now, it just looks like it's being handed over to the GAP. And again, let me reiterate, it'd be amazing if the GAP got this, but it should be open up to fair market and a competitive market with our current, especially with the current market that we are in. A few things to also consider with these agreement of sales that I've noticed, and I hope that you've all made note of it as well, is some of the terms that are in there, such as the contingency period of 180 days for them to do whatever they're needing to do. It gives them 180 days to back out as well. That's 180 days that the school is going to have to maintain these properties in addition to our new ones that we've just built. So I would maybe consider countering to lower that contingency timeframe if that's possible, or reducing the amount of contingencies if possible. There was also a mention made about possible engineering costs or additional costs to this district as it goes through this process with them. And I would encourage you to look at that and make sure that there's no additional cost to the district in that regard as well. As a taxpayer, that's not something that I would look at kindly, because we do owe it to this community to do the due diligence on this and obtain the most that we can from specifically the Lickdale asset. You're voting to potentially increase our taxes, which I strongly oppose, and I'll state that for the record. But we only have one chance to get this right and get as much money from this asset as possible. So public's perception of what is transpiring is another very important point that I would like to make. So again, when you're attempting to increase our taxes and have not opened this up for to see what the public's interest is in this, it does not look good. So again, I would implore you to talk with your representative to see if there's some things that you can maybe change with the terms if you have not already done that and are not already looked in. Because based on the real estate activity that we're seeing within this district, I would absolutely be taking another look at this proposal and ensure the district has crossed all of its T's and dotted all of its I's with this.
Great. Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. Second public comment for this evening is Rachel Murphy. And again, I will start your time as soon as you state your name.
Good evening. My name is Rachel Murphy. I live at 19 Wildflower Circle in Lebanon. I will be brief, and I have notes to keep me on track. I'm a parent of 2 students here in the district and a member of the community who has a vested interest in seeing our students thrive and grow. To that end, I just want to voice my enthusiastic support for the list of books submitted by the library staff for approval tonight. I had a chance to look over the list earlier today. I think it is fantastic. My only wish is that it was 70 pages long instead of 7. There is a fantastic range of genre, authors, subject matters. There's what some of my kids' teachers like to call dessert books. There's literary classics, there's graphic novels, there's true crime, there's fiction, nonfiction. You have it. I was super impressed with the list. I'm sure you all know that you have great faculty and staff here, and it's clear that the librarians put a lot of thought into curating a list that has educational and literary value and sparks a love of reading in all different types of readers. So I just want to encourage again the board to approve that list tonight without condition or constraint, and to support the freedom of students in this district to read the books that they want to read. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. Okay, we will move to the items for discussion. Dr. Messinger.
Yeah, I just want to clarify one thing for both speakers. At the typically, I shouldn't say never, but typically the committee meeting is for the discussion, and the points that come up are, when we get to those items, there may be discussion and that the board has to have. We don't typically vote at the committee meeting unless it's a smaller item, sometimes a hiring. There are occasions, but typically we don't vote. The voting actually comes next week. I just wanted to clarify that there won't be a vote if you're waiting for that. I know that that's something that is sometimes the process is not always very well laid out. And I don't think I've said that in a long time. So I thought I'd say it again tonight, which is, I think, a good process because it gives everybody an opportunity to look at it more carefully. It's more transparent, I think, for our community. And yes, we do add things as the week goes on because there's always things changing. But for the most part, 90% of the agenda next week was probably here already. The first three items are just our typical approval of minutes, student activity count, and cash disbursements. I'll move on to 6 and just state that I believe that 6.1 should become obviously a discussion item rather than a consent item. If there's no opposition to that, we'll move that to discussion for next week. Leanne, would you like to talk a little bit about that in your presentation for next week? Just a brief, that we wanted to have some discussion tonight about where we are in case they give you a different direction.
Right. You want me to discuss that now?
Go ahead, hit those. Yeah, hit your couple of slides.
Okay, thanks. While Kirk's bringing that up, I'll just go through. So as you can see on the wording here, we are proposing a balanced budget at this point using the index increase of taxes at the 5.1%. And that's just under 45 million in revenue and expenses. And as you can see up on this first slide, what I did was we put up a comparison of the school districts in Lebanon County, their current millage rate for 22-23, and what percentage increase they did for 22-23. At the bottom, we noted that the 23-24 tax adjusted index rate for Northern Lebanon is the 5.1% and what that millage rate is. And then per the school board's request, I did follow through and look up the PDE did approve our exception to go to the 6.5%. If that is approved by the board, and that's the 16.2880 millage rate. And you can see that in comparison with everyone's 22-23 millage rate and where we fall within the county. We're very close to the other school districts. We are the lowest school district in the county right now.
And I'm going to piggyback off of that. There's a reason why you don't see the other school districts 23-24 figures and ours compared to it. You see what ours would be if we go to the index, but you don't see what the other county schools are doing. While we happen to have a relatively good feel based on personal conversations with what the other schools are doing, we actually had the first meetings of the month, and therefore we wind up having to present first without knowing for sure what number they settled on. I do know that based upon numbers we're hearing, even at the index, we are still the lowest in the county. However, we can't present to you finalized numbers for 2023-24 until they've obviously approved them with their boards, which won't come until after hours. So we can tell you what we suspect. We can tell you what we hear. We can't tell you what actuality is.
Correct. Kirk, if you want to go to the next slide. And then what I always like to show is our current tax millage rate and what that is for our average homeowner in Northern Lebanon School District, which is $186,000. And then I also show what it would be at the 5.1% as well as the 6.5%, and what the increase is from the prior year for that average homeowner. And it's $145 or $185. And then also there in blue in the middle, I show the estimated additional tax revenue that would be coming into Northern Lebanon School District based upon those increases.
And Leanne, the state, the draft for the state, we were waiting for some direction tonight to make sure, because we were asked about the exception. or even if they don't want to go to the index, we're waiting on some direction. How fast will you be able to send them the draft? I know it'll be on the meeting next week. How quickly could we get them anything that they decide tonight, or not decide, but recommend tonight?
Do you mean the PD 2028,
the
the actual
PD,
budget that we will be
yeah.
submitting to the state? I would hope that I could finish that up by end of day tomorrow, halfway through Thursday, get that out to you guys by Thursday afternoon.
Okay, so after any discussion you want to have, we'll be able to hopefully discern from that what direction you'd like to go. Obviously, for those that aren't familiar with the budget process, the first approval in May is also tentative approval, and it can be changed at the final approval in June. So there's a period there of time that if something changes. But Leanne will do a more in-depth look for the public at the next meeting as well, going through some other figures, but wanted to get you started and to hear thoughts on what currently at the index, what that looks like, and that number on the exception. Do you happen to remember? I know you have the percentage up there. Do you happen to remember the dollar amount?
Yeah, I did want to go over that. So the exception, if you go to the 6.5%, is an additional approximately $318,000 for the school district. And I did want to also note, I think we had the high school renovation. If we would move forward with that, a bond payment for that is not included in this balanced budget at this point. So I just wanted to make note of that.
Any thoughts? Any direction that you'd like to see us look at?
Yeah, so I guess the question is, as it stands today, we would be reviewing and potentially approving a budget that's based on the 5.1% index tax increase. The question I think that we pose to the committee is whether this board has a desire to see or to vote alternatively on the 6.5% index rate increase, or not index, 6.5% increase instead, which would require additional preparation by Leanne if we chose to do that.
Or less?
Or less, correct.
And I also wanted to note that if you use the exception, you don't have to use all of it. Is that what you were saying, Gary? Instead of a 5.1 or it's 6.5, you could do a 6%. We can work with that. It's not all or nothing.
Yeah, I was also suggesting they don't have to go to the index. Our budget is balanced at the index. We would obviously go back and tweak other things, but they have a lot of options at this point. I will say anything past the balanced budget that we already have, our recommendation to the board would be to actually budget the funds for capital projects, specifically for capital projects, and go directly into capital projects, which is something our district has never done. What we've done is we've taken at the end of the year, if we have funds left over, we designated them for capital projects. However, we've never had money put into fund, at least in our recollection. I shouldn't say never. I could ask my dad. He was board president 25 years ago or whatever. Maybe he knows. But to my recollection, we've never put funds budgeted into capital project. If you're thinking about it in terms of your household, if you want to purchase a car and you don't want to borrow, and you decide out of your monthly budget, you want to put in $200 a month toward well, that's not going to get you very far this year or at this point, but you get the idea. That's a possibility. Those things then are used for the things that we bring up, the track renovations that need to be done every 10 years, the stage lighting, those types of expenses that are reoccurring, but not reoccurring every year. So that's a possibility. But again, it's balanced at the index right now. But you had asked about it, so we're presenting it.
And so do we know or have a offhand estimation as to what we think that bond payment would look like for next year if we were to pursue a capital projects bond?
Yes, assuming that the timeline would be that I would borrow the money in late fall, December timeline, we would be making a payment in the late spring for approximately $280,000 towards the bond.
And to clarify, that's not currently in this balanced budget that's being proposed at this moment.
Correct. That I do not have that in our budget at this time. But I think we should also make note that I budget flat funding from the state. So we don't know what we are going to be getting for basic education funding from the state yet. They only, oddly enough, release those numbers after our budgets are done. So we budget at a flat amount.
Well,
So-
not only after our budgets are done, but after our budgets are actually due to the state.
Correct.
Then they release that amount. So our typical, our increase from the state up until the last 2 years was what, in a 200 some $1,000 range. Last year was more. We're anticipating, hoping, crossing our fingers for more, but we don't know that number until, this is why in the end, we often will wind up with a small surplus because we're actually pretty close. I think when each year right now, we're doing a pretty good job with that. But because we have to flat fund, if they say there's no more money going towards schools, we don't want to be in a situation where we're trying to find that money in mid-year.
Correct.
Leanne, what's the building sale? What do we think that's coming in at right now? Based on agreements, estimates, if it all landed today?
A little over 8 million for all four.
A little over 8 million. And that'll go to the fund balance at this point, or into capital projects.
Correct.
Fund
We could
balance.
designate that towards helping us offset some future bond payments until we are where we are at for those.
Till we get there.
Yep.
You had the chart up there of all the other districts, and I looked at that earlier today, and then because the mill rate can be so confusing. I mean, we can be the low mill rate, but if our home values are different, our income is different, really the impact on the person in the community, the taxpayer is, can be drastically different. I looked at it a couple different ways. We are still, and this doesn't say this is why we should raise taxes, but we still are, why not on?
Just not close enough.
I'm not close enough. We're still not funding, the school through taxes at the same level of these other districts. Even I used your high number of 6.5, I think, and I think under that, maybe if no one moved, if everybody stayed zero, I think we end up as number 5 out of 6 in the, in the county. Whether you look at it income based as a percentage of income that becomes taxes, or as a percentage of the home value. I mean, both of those scenarios end up that we are still, from a funding standpoint, from a cost standpoint, someone coming here and saying, what's it cost to live in this district? We are still, again, if no one moves anything, and that's not going to happen. So, I mean, I believe even with, no matter where we end, if we end at 3, 5.1, 6.5, we're still going to be attractive, if you will, from a tax standpoint, people trying to come into the district. Obviously, there are projects, capital projects we've talked about. I mean, whether it's security of our schools, those kind of things that somehow we've got to figure out how we fund those, whether that's through the full renovation, et cetera. We need those funds to keep up with that and do those things that really need to happen. Invest in curriculum, invest in those other things. So as much as I don't love the idea of raising taxes, I think it's an inevitable, and we are still very competitive from a district standpoint when we look at it from a real estate standpoint.
No. So, so I think, this is like it's like an unfortunate perfect storm of circumstances that is happening right now. We committed to a beautiful elementary school project in 2020 prior to the pandemic, prior to inflation hitting when and as it did. And we were able to do that. This is just my perspective. We were able to do that with, relatively minimal, if any, impact on the budget due to debt service and other things. But we are getting to a point now where we are, in addition to seeing the savings that are going to come from that new elementary school, we are looking at a secondary school that is desperately in need of massive renovation. And I think there isn't a clear path forward for us to do that outside of a tax increase at least the index. And as much as I hate raising taxes, and my personal beliefs aside, I think we have a fiduciary duty to the district to make sure that we're doing what is in the best interest of this district, not just looking at today and the impact on taxes, but looking 30 years down the road when I will probably be dead. But I think it's an obligation for us to take a look at that. And this is, like I said, it's a perfect storm. Our costs on everything are going up. I mean, the cost of a gallon of milk is going up. The cost of electricity is going up. And as I think about this, if you look at your utility bills are increasing. And if you look at the line items on some of those utility bills, you'll see what's called distribution systems improvement charge here in Pennsylvania. And those DSICs are done because utilities for 70 years failed to make the investments that they needed to make in their infrastructure system so that the system could continue to operate at a safe and effective level. I think that corresponds quite effectively when you talk about a public school district. So all of that to say, I think we absolutely need a budget set at 5.1. As much as I don't want to do it, I think it's reasonable for us to take a look at a budget at 6.5. I think there are just a large number of factors that we absolutely need to consider. And I think one of the things that I wanted to touch on a little bit is that we have looked at, some data as to what this looks like, again, on that long-term planning approach, what it means for us today. If we were to increase taxes at, say, the 5.1 index, how soon can we as a district get back to a lower annual tax increase? And the simple fact of the matter is that if we want to get to a point due to obligations that we have, capital obligations and debt obligations, we can quicker get down to a lower annual tax increase at some point in the future if we bite the bullet and go higher this year than if we were to stick at the index. It's going to take us longer as a district to get back to a point where we can raise taxes at a lower level, or perhaps someday down the road decrease taxes. Although I don't think that's a realistic option until and unless Harrisburg changes the way that schools are funded. Right now, we have to fund the school through property taxes. I hate it, but that's what we have to do. I'm really hopeful that something will happen in Harrisburg, but we don't have control over that. So while we're operating with the things that we have under our control, I think it would be prudent for us to look at a 6.5.
Dave, can you hear me? Yes.
Good evening. Yes, I can hear you.
Dave, if we prepare two budgets, one at the index and one at the 6.5, and then a motion can we prepare to put them on the agenda and then a motion be made for one of them and a vote held? How does that work if there's some uncertainty about where people want to go with that? Do you know?
I would say it's rare, and I would want to double check on it, but I believe you can have two for purposes of next month. But then once we approve that one next month, there needs to be one that's then put up for inspection. But I think if you wanted to go that route, I believe you could do so.
Okay, I'm just to be clear, I'm suggesting we put them on, a motion would be made for one of them, and then a vote would be held. And that, if the motion passed, obviously the other one we would not vote on. And that would be the tentative one. Is I guess okay. All right. I just was, is Leanne, is that a huge deal for you?
No, I can do that. I think this is something that's extremely important and should be given proper consideration. So I'm willing to do the two budgets for next week.
Okay. If the board is okay with that, then I will just echo that, as a taxpayer, I was hoping the board was going to lower my taxes, but I will say that we have things in this building that it was built in the 50s and they have not been replaced. And I know that we've taken samplings of sections of pipe out that are filled with inches of gunk, and is why we're repairing boilers on a regular basis, and HVAC systems. We're spent some time in a classroom and have to turn off the air conditioning so you can hear people talk. There are things that are run down, are falling apart, and we have not spent money on for years and years and years. And unfortunately, I think this board was put in a place where they're bearing some of the brunt of that. I do believe that some of the things we've done, I think the elementary school and the effectiveness there, I believe the start of the capital projects funds put us, and even down to the point where I know Brad and Mason have been working on replacement lists and how often things need to be done, so it doesn't come as a shock every time we have to do something. I think it sets the district up for years of success financially. Unfortunately, the funding formula is not good. And hopefully that will change. And by the way, interesting that you put a 30-year limit on your life. I appreciate that, knowing that.
If I'm lucky, if I make it through this year.
And maybe one day it will get fixed. And I hope it does. But in lieu of that, I think it's at least Leanne and my responsibility to at least try to put us in a position where we'll be successful in the future. I'll be gone too, so but I still want this district to succeed down the road. And I think you guys were put in a tough spot with some of this, and appreciate the feedback. We'll prepare two budgets and await the vote next week.
Would like to hear any other comment. If any other directors have comments, I think robust discussion is always better than none.
Nobody wants to raise taxes. I mean, that's the long and the short of it. None of us want to pay more taxes, but we're put here to do what's in the best interest of our kids. And if we want to continue to educate our kids well and give them what they need, that takes money. And we're not getting a lot more from the state and federal government. They've clearly not made that a huge priority. And so it has to come from local taxpayers. Initially, when I heard the index was 5.1, I thought that was huge. And I did not vote to investigate going higher. 6.5% isn't that much higher, but as Barry mentioned earlier, when we look at that projected long range, how the difference in $300,000 1 year incrementally, or not incrementally, exponentially builds upon itself over a decade, that does make a large difference in what we can do for our students as a district. And it also, as was mentioned earlier, it does allow us to kind of level out and go back to a more gradual type of increase in taxes, where we're not moving to 5 or 6%. And so we can be, we don't have to do that every year. Other than that, I don't know what to say. Nobody wants to pay more taxes, but we have to do what's in the best interest of our kids. And I do think that
we could use $300,000 to do a lot of good for our kids, to put a lot of support systems in place, to get more teachers in classrooms, to attract more teachers. We know that the teacher shortage is huge and teachers aren't going to come if we don't pay them. So I don't like it, but I think that 6.5 is the fiscally responsible thing to do for our kids, which means that our community will be better.
I don't know if I can say it any better, Michelle. So that was very well done. Thank you. Unlike Barry, I do plan on being around here 30 years from now. Why not? Well, I agree. One of the things that drew our family to Northern Lebanon School District was that it was the lowest tax rate in the county. And as was already mentioned, even if we do jump to the 6.5%, I think by the end of the day, we'll still be the lowest tax rate or millage rate, at least in the county. That being said, I think it's worth the investment now. The adage of, if everyone sacrifices 1 year for the greater good of what happens 5 years, 10 years down the road, I think it makes very a lot of fiscal sense to do that now and make that investment now, and it'll help our school grow. It'll just add more to our students and to what's going on here.
Well, unless there's any more discussion, I look forward to a very thorough discussion next week with the budget. So thank you. We'll look forward to those proposals. And that will be on the discussion agenda for next week, obviously. Dr. Messinger.
Okay. Other things, CTC budget, which is not done by us, is there for your approval. To look over. There is a slight increase there, but I think they do a pretty good job of keeping their expenses. And congratulations, Dave, treasurer, CTC. The officers are listed there. Our extended school year service agreement with Vista is on for your approval. Our annual solicitor agreement is on for approval. And then our annual special education legal consortium agreement that we use with IU 13 is also on for approval. Any questions on the other items on 6?
I just want to talk briefly about the CTC budget. Overall, the budget for 23-24 is $9,234,000. The increase overall is 2.63%. But when you break that down between the county schools and, the formula of what we pay, our percentage of contributions for the CTC is 11.54% or 11.5%. And the percentage increase next year for Northern Lebanon is 1.83%. So you're right. It's not that bad of an increase.
Okay, 7.1, motion to authorize Leanne to work with Shetron auctioneers. Any buildings that we sell that the incoming party does not want some of the items in it, some of the old desks, chairs, those kinds of things. We would be working with them to auction off. This would be the organization that gives it, there's no upfront cost, but then they charge a percentage of what you make. We're looking into whether or not they have a formal agreement that we would also bring to you, trying to work through that. But in the meantime, we're going to start looking at dates and start talking with them. One of the things too that we wanted to put on here is by board policy, there's things that need to be voted on if the value is in excess of $5,000. We're asking that if someone wants to buy something for more than $5,000, that you grant us the ability to do that. I doubt there's going to be many items that are more than $5,000, but just in case, you know, there's an autographed desk that Leanne sat at, you know. You may have your old desk. Come and get it, please. So that's the motion for that. And then there was some discussion, obviously, about sales agreements. The two sales agreements are on there. And may want to move that to discussion next week. And maybe in the meantime, there's some questions to look at.
Yeah, thank you. Am I on? Yeah, okay. You know, so it's not typically, you know, the practice of the board to respond to public comment, but I did want to acknowledge that Ms. Day and I have had a very good email conversation about some of the questions that she posed tonight in public comment. And I think there were some very good questions raised. So one that particularly sparked my interest was that contingency, the 180 days contingency. I would like to know, and I don't know if we can say it now, but if you happen to know, but is that 180-day contingency a requirement from the government? Is it something from the state? Is that something that is worth looking at before we do sign the agreement?
We did actually bring that up, Brad and I, with the solicitor for us, Dave Jones, as well as the solicitor for the GAP folks. And they are requesting that. And Dave Jones did agree that it's reasonable because of the fact that the zoning for East Hanover will need to go through their township and have be changed. It's part of the contingency for the purchase of that building. And they have pretty many tests and things that they need to go through to purchase the building as a requirement of being purchased with the federal dollars.
Have we gotten a timeline from the GAP as to when they think that they might start that process?
As soon as the agreements are approved by us, they would like to start the process. And they did say that they are giving themselves that length of time because of the zoning change that they will need to make. But they also did say that should they have everything done and wrapped up, they would like possession and settlement to happen or occur before that timeline. It's just that they needed that to be able to ensure that they could have enough time to go to the township, meet with them, and get the zoning change that they need.
Because of some of the questions raised, would it be reasonable to have Dave Jones from Stock and Leader come next week and talk a bit about why these sales are very good in the best interest of our district, why it is advantageous to us to go this route rather than put it up on public sale? I know we've heard about it, but the public is obviously interested in that as well. Would that
Sure.
be something that would be okay?
We can certainly reach out to Dave. He does attend other board meetings. I don't know what his, availability is, but we can reach out to him.
I just remember that resoundingly, it made great sense for the district to continue in this direction, but he would be certainly able to give those details to everybody.
And if I may interrupt, excuse me, I can definitely check with Dave Jones to see what his schedule is. And if for any reason he is not available for next week, I can work with him and Brooke when she returns to the office to possibly put together a memorandum for the board on those reasons, if that would be helpful for you with the discussion with the community.
I think that'd be great. Thank you.
Coming back to the 180-day contingency, is there a way to, I don't know if it's already in there or not, but add language to that effect, is that if they are finished ahead of time, they would settle before the 180 days? Is there any way to sort of put that into writing?
It's in there in the fact that it says on or before 180 days.
Okay.
I guess we could say if everything's done, we would want that done, but I mean, that's going to be us holding them to that. And they definitely seem to be in the mindset that they would like them as soon as possible. They just want to make sure that they do their due diligence and everything that's required of them.
And then if for whatever reason they were to back out of it, then we're back where we can put it up for, public sale again if we wanted to, even though, we've internally looked at those disadvantages. That would still be the option then.
Correct. We could do that. And we also have the caveat in the agreement that should they do any digging, or any studies like that, that everything will be put back the way it was, and that it won't be an additional cost incurred by the district to make the
the buildings and the grounds to the way that they were before they started their process.
Yeah, I think the agreement's actually, it does say their desire is 90 days closing. And they can waive all of these other exceptions potentially. Sounds like they can't because of some legal reasons, but their intention is to close quickly.
Their intention, their desire, from what I have gathered, is to close quickly, and they aren't looking at these as a way to back out of agreements. They are, I mean, they came to us, they are 100% interested in these buildings.
Yeah. The one piece of language that I didn't quite understand in there though was where it says the buyer shall be the sole judge of the acceptability of zoning. It doesn't really say that if it's not, well, there's another part that says if it's not, the zoning's not approved, but this part just didn't make sense. I think that's probably why bringing David up or, getting someone else to take a look at it would be good, because them being the sole judge of that just seems a little odd. Might just be legalese language that I don't understand, but it was an odd sentence in there.
Sure, we'll have to have Dave come and comment on that. I mean, he did go over these agreements with us, but I'm assuming it means that they want it to be zoned what they're requiring and what they need.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That we aren't saying that for them.
So we'll move to discussion.
Yep.
And we'll invite Dave or David or Brooke and have them talk to us. The other two revolve around Jonestown. This is that land swap from years and years ago that we are writing back, not correcting, but there's some land, if you remember, behind the house that the T-ball field, it splits the T-ball field in half, that the borough gave to us years and years ago for usage. And what we're doing as we're selling this building, we are granting that land back to them so they can keep that field intact for the Little League and whatever other purposes they use that park, area for. In addition to that, they are graciously willing to take over the graveyard that's on the Jonestown site, and we'll maintain that for us so that we don't have to worry about it, and neither does anyone that purchases that. So that is there as well. That is probably less controversial, and maybe those two will keep on the consent, but the other two will certainly move over to discussion.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Under extracurricular, fall play is there, the Somewhat True Tale of Robin Hood, and Pat has a hard copy of that if anyone wants to read it. In the meantime, it is a pretty simple, easy read. It's actually a play that's often done for younger kids. And she'll have it afterwards. See her if you want to borrow that. And if there's a couple of people, we'll get you to drop it off and pass it from one person to the next. And there's two musicals on there, one for 2024, one for 2025, Willy Wonka Jr. for 2024 and Shrek for 2025. There are two trips. The senior class trip to New Jersey for 2024 is listed for you. And then as well as the art club trip that is also for 2024. We had a proposal to take middle school girls volleyball, which has been a club for us, and change that over to PIAA. We've had great participation. It's grown every year, and we have enough kids and enough participants to do a PIAA sport for that. And I will tell you, and we can move it to discussion because the costs are not there, and Dr. Kuiper has that slide. Actually, he gave it to me, but I thought he was going to be here, so I didn't have it ready. But I will send that to you and we'll move it to discussion so you can look at it. It's coaches, referees, that kind of thing. Typical cost for a middle school sport. There's always some initial costs at the beginning to purchase a few items, but to get started, but typical middle school costs, not too much there. I'll send that to you. We'll move that to discussion. Library books 8.5 that you heard comment about tonight. And then our co-curricular list, there were a couple of small changes. The one club that we have listed there, you'll see red through it. That did not meet. However, we did have Envirothon at the high school that needed to be added. We did add that. The other one that is on there is for the musical. We were going to do that as a separate, as a bill, an invoice. It is one of our teachers, though. We didn't have to go out of the district employees. And for the sake of ease for her, so that she doesn't have to file an additional tax form, we moved that over to the co-curricular list. And those three changes are highlighted for you. Questions about that?
I would just like to once again acknowledge public comments, and I really appreciate both public comments, the depth and the reason nature of both comments. I really do appreciate it. I also, just regarding the library books, because it was brought up in public comment this evening, I did take a look, pretty thorough look at the list, and there are a lot of books in there. There's books that I have read, lots of books that I've read. I want to acknowledge that we live in a culture now where sadly, the books in the library have become a contentious issue. And I'm not dismissing that, because I know that, as we've talked as a board before, there's content in all sorts of books that can be deemed questionable. I'm not asking to move this to the discussion, but I would like to at least state that I am interested in pursuing a means by which we can proactively address those issues when they come up. I contacted the superintendent today, and with his permission, met briefly with the secondary library technician about her process of how she identifies the books and puts them up for approval. And I think we have, first of all, let me say we have a very impressive library technician, and the work that she's doing is very good, I think, and her process for doing that is very good. I just talked with her on my own about some options that we might have for identifying some books that might deem to be controversial, and I think it's worth us exploring. So I'm not going to ask to move this to discussion, but I think there may be something in the future that there may be a way that we can accommodate a lot of various interests within our district. I think, part of being a school board director is balancing competing interests. I think it's in every sense of everything that we do, we're balancing competing interests. And I think that that's something I think we should do proactively. So I just wanted to, in committee with everyone, just let you know that I'm thinking through that, and I may have a proposal to put forward at some point, maybe probably not for next week, but maybe some other time.
So just to follow up on that, if there would be any proposed changes, they would come before the full board.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Okay. 9.1 and 9.2, final adoption of 2 policies and tentative adoption of 3. We continue to work our way through the 600s and update those. Those are relatively straightforward and somewhat short and much more fun to work on than some of the long ones, but those are up there for your tentative approval. 9.3 ATSI and TSI school plan. The ATSI plan is to address needs of our learning support students at the high school in terms of success or successful scores on state testing. TSI is actually for middle school learning support. However, TSI will wind up not ever making its way to the state once we reorganize in terms of moving the 6th grade over. Because of the restructuring, it resets the clock on this, and any strategies that we're going to use for our middle school students, like the CDTs, those will roll, we will roll those into the ATSI plan. So the TSI plan, while we're going to approve it because the state is telling us we need to approve it, we're actually never going to use it in that form. It's going to roll, the strategies will roll into the ATSI plan because of the restructuring. The health and safety plan needs to be reapproved every 6 months as a condition for receiving the ESSER funds until 2024. At least that's the date we have right now. So you'll see that. So that is, nothing has changed on that. We don't do anything differently with it. However, we put it back on. The only thing we will do is after it's reapproved, we'll change the date, send it to the state and say it was reapproved, and then you'll see it again in the fall. Our school counselor, there's a school counselor affiliation agreement with Liberty University. When they have students that live in our area and want to do counseling internships, we have an agreement with them. We love our counseling interns. That gives us extra support there as they're getting on the job training. Your list of 202 seniors for diplomas is there for you to take a look at. And that's all for items 9. Any questions on 9? Okay, and 10, we have a substitute. Mr. Goddard is going to be working for us, doing some substitute custodial work. We have a short-term professional substitute at Jonestown, and we have a new phys ed teacher that we're recommending. He's coming from Lebanon School District and is currently actually our baseball coach. And that's a retirement that we had Mrs. Jackson, who's been teaching for 65 years. No, 43. I gotta check on that. 43, I think. We have a substitute that is resigning. We have an autistic support that at the end of the year will be leaving us. And we have another retirement, Mrs. Walker out at 2nd grade. And we do celebrate them on the Thursday. It'll be Thursday this year, June 1st. I think. Yep. Pat's saying yes. Okay. So you're welcome to attend that as we celebrate them. We appointed Leanne, the treasurer, back in December. However, it's technically usually an annual appointment going into the new fiscal year. We listed her again as treasurer. Our PSBA, we're going to need a PSBA delegate. So if anyone is willing to do that, we'll put a name in there. Anybody?
I'll defer to Director Bucks, but if she's not willing, I am.
It's a Saturday morning, right? And we can do it virtually. I'll do it.
Thank you for that enthusiasm, Mrs. Director Bucks. 10.6, our CBA is done with the exception of anytime you do this, you wind up with multiple drafts and you're making sure everything got corrected and the grammar is correct and everything else. But it is done. It is being voted on by NLEA. It's being presented to on Monday and voted on by NLEA on Tuesday prior to our meeting. And then assuming all goes well, will be voted on that night for us. And that was a neat process. I think a good process. Had great discussion. Really enjoyed talking with their committee and working through that. But that should be ready to go. We can move that to discussion, or we can always move it next week if you see something too. Either way, well, why don't we just move it to discussion? If there's no discussion, that's fine, but we'll move it there just in case there's any questions. And that's actually it for 10. Any other questions on 10? Okay, and then from an informational standpoint, the IU board membership ballot was given to everyone. Remember that needs to be in to Pat by 5/9. And then there was one revision we made, not to the student days or anything with the calendar. We changed new teacher induction days and had the update there for you. It was I forget even why we changed it, but we had to change it to make it work for some other things that we had going on. That's it for 11.
That takes us through the agenda Prospective agenda for next week. Is there any new business for the committee tonight? Okay, hearing none. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.